Good afternoon, everyone. Now we are going to discuss about the assessment for learning, and we were going to deal with the lesson 1, which is using assessment to classify learning and understanding. Now, we should know first our learning objectives. First is to distinguish assessment for learning from assessment of learning and assessment as learning. Second, state the purpose of assessment to classify learning and understanding. And lastly, discuss the features of assessment and their implications to planning, implementing, and improving learning. Assessment is a process that is used to keep track of learners' progress in relation to particular learning standards set in the Department of Education. Moreover, assessment activities done in schools may be categorized into three forms: assessment of learning, assessment as learning, and assessment for learning. This approach fosters a collaborative environment where teachers and students actively engage in understanding learning objectives, identifying strengths, and areas for improvement, and setting personalized goals. First, assessment of learning. It refers to the use of assessment to determine learners' acquired knowledge and skills from instruction and whether they were able to achieve the curriculum outcomes, or it is generally summative in nature. Assessment of learning assists teachers in using evidence of student learning to assess achievement against outcomes and standards, sometimes referred to as a summative assessment. It usually occurs to define key points during a teaching work or at the end of a unit, term, or semester, and may be used to rank or grade students. The effectiveness of assessment of learning for grading or ranking purposes depends on the validity, reliability, and weighting placed on any one task. Its effectiveness as an opportunity for learning depends on the nature and the quality of the feedback. Teachers determine the progress or application of knowledge or skills against a standard. It is also emphasizing on the scoring, grades, and competition. The assessment is used to collect evidence of student progress and may be used for achievement grading on grades. Second, assessment for learning refers to the use of assessment to identify the needs of learners in order to modify instruction or learning activities in a classroom. It is formative in nature, and it is meant to identify gaps in learning experiences and learners so they can be assisted in achieving the curriculum outcomes. Assessment for learning involves teachers using evidence about students' knowledge, understanding, and skills to inform their teaching, sometimes referred to as a formative assessment. It usually occurs throughout the teaching and learning process to clarify student learning and understanding. Teachers and peers check progress in learning to help learners to determine how to improve. It involves formal and informal assessment activities as part of learning and to inform the planning of future learning. It somehow reflects on the feedback, support, and collaboration of the students. Assessment for learning is reflective in nature. Results and findings, when used by the teacher in giving constructive feedbacks, would let students recognize their achievement and difficulties. Next is assessment as learning. It refers to the use of assessment to help learners become self-regulated. It is a formative in nature and meant to use assessment tasks, results, and feedback to help learners practice self-regulation and make adjustments to achieve the curriculum outcomes. Assessment as learning occurs when students are their own assessors. Students monitor their own learning, ask questions, and use a range of strategies to decide what they know and can do, and how to use assessment for new learning. Learner takes responsibility for their own learning and asks questions about the learning and the learning process and explores how to improve. Learners use formal and informal feedback and self-assessment to help understand the next steps in learning. This somehow extends their collaboration, reflection, and self-evaluation. Here are some definitions to clarify and differentiate the three types of assessment. So we have the assessment of learning, assess teachers to use evidence of student learning to assess student achievement against learning goals and standards. We have assessment as learning. It involves students in the learning process where they monitor their own progress, ask questions, and practice skills. And we have assessment for learning. Enables teachers to use information about students' knowledge, understanding, and skills to inform their teaching. Now let's focus on the assessment for learning. So what is assessment for learning? Assessment as part of classroom activities is a fundamental process required to promote learning and ultimately achievement. Learners need to know and understand the following before learning can take place. First, what is the aim of the learning? Why do they need to learn it? Why are they in terms of achieving the aim? And how can they achieve the aim? When learners know and understand these principles, the quality of learning will improve. Sharing this information with learners will promote ownership of the learning aims and a sense of shared responsibility between the teacher and the learner to achieve those aims. Improving learners' confidence and self-esteem reflects positively in learners' work and their motivation is improved. To promote the effective assessment, teachers should need to explain the learning aims to learners and check their understanding. Demonstrate the standards learners are required to achieve and help them recognize when they have achieved that standard. Give effective feedback on assessment decisions so that learners know how to improve. Demonstrate high expectations and make it obvious to learners that they believe that they can improve on their past performance. Next, provide regular opportunities for teachers and learners to reflect on the last performance and review learners' progress. And develop learners' self-assessment skills so that they can recognize what aspects of their own work need to improve. The purpose of assessment. Assessment for learning is an approach to teaching and learning where feedback is utilized to improve students' performance. This refers to assessment that is given while the teacher is in the process of student formation. Generally, it is commonly referred to as a formative assessment, that is, assessment designed to inform instruction. By prioritizing formative assessment, educators can create a dynamic learning experience that empowers students to take ownership of their learning. According to Corpus 2015, formative assessment also includes the pre-test and the post-test that a teacher gives to ensure learning. The assessment before instruction, or the diagnostic assessment or pre-test, describes the entry knowledge or skills pushing teachers to revise plan instruction accordingly. Pre-tests establish what students need to learn. It provides a way for teachers to gather key information about what students know and are able to do prior to instruction, as well as what student interests and learning styles are. However, through post-tests, it is generally treated as tools for assessment of learning. They may also become means for assessment for learning if the results were used as basis in accurately planning future learning episodes. Post-test is conducted after the discussion. It is to show what the students have learned during the discussion. The purpose of assessment is to help the students to demonstrate their learning, provide feedback on the errors they've been making, and help provide opportunities to better their performance with each assessment. For the teachers, it works as an excellent tool to figure out if their teaching methodology is working or not. Teachers need to create learning opportunities where learners can progress at their own pace and undertake consolidation activities where necessary. Assessment for learning strategies should be implemented in such a way that quality feedback provided to learners based on assessment decision. It will help to challenge the more able learner to reach new levels of achievement and in doing so, reach their full potential. Assessment for learning is all about informing learners of their progress to empower them to take the necessary action to improve their performance.
Good day everyone, I'm Jamaica Joyce Trologo and I'm going to discuss the features of assessment for learning. Assessment for learning is a powerful approach that helps teachers understand their students' progress and learning needs. It's all about using assessment to improve learning, not just to measure it. First is assesses students' progress and learning needs. This means teachers use assessment to understand where students are at, what they're struggling with, and what they're ready to learn next. It's about individualizing learning based on individual needs. Second is provides clear learning targets. Clear learning targets, also known as learning goals, are essential. Students need to know what they're aiming for to be successful. Next is enhances learners' motivation. When students understand what they're learning and see their progress, they become more motivated to learn. Assessment for learning is a continuous process. Assessment for learning is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process that happens throughout their learning journey. Teachers gather information about student progress frequently and use it to adapt their teaching. Entails teacher-student collaboration. Teachers and students work together to identify learning targets, plan learning activities, and reflect on progress. This partnership is key to making assessment for learning effective. Assessment for learning requires descriptive feedback. Descriptive feedback is specific, focused on the learning goals, and helps students understand what they did well and what they need to improve on. The last one is assessment for learning involves students. Assessment for learning is not just something teachers do to students. It's something they do with students. Students are actively involved in understanding the learning targets, reflecting on their progress, and setting goals. Planning is an essential part of a teacher's workload. Teachers need to plan and create opportunities within each session for both the learner and the teacher to obtain information about the learner's progress towards the learning goals defined by the teacher at the start of the session. So, planning is the strategic and deliberate process of designing learning experiences that intentionally incorporate assessment to guide and improve student learning. It's not just about creating tests or quizzes. It's about weaving assessment into a fabric of every lesson to ensure that both teachers and students are constantly gathering information about learning progress. The planning phase is crucial for implementing assessment for learning successfully, where teachers need to decide what is going to be learned in a particular session. Teachers need to identify the specific content or skills that will be covered in each session. This is about defining the learning objectives. Define the learning goals. Clear learning goals define what students should be able to do by the end of the session. These goals should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bounded. Communicate the learning goals to the learners. Students need to understand the learning goals to be actively involved in their learning. Next, compile questions and design tasks to check learner understanding of the learning goals. Teachers create questions and tasks that help them assess student understanding of the learning goals. This could involve quizzes, discussions, projects, or other activities. Explain to the learners the criteria which will be used to assess their work. Students Students should know how their work will be assessed. This could involve providing a rubric or a list of criteria. Decide how feedback is going to be provided. Teachers need to determine how they will provide feedback to students. This could involve written comments, verbal feedback, or peer feedback. Define how learners will take an active part in their assessment process. Students should be encouraged to reflect on their own learning, set goals, and monitor their progress. Plan for opportunities for learners to use the feedback provided on the assessment decision to further progress. Students should be given opportunities to use the feedback they receive. Implementing. It is crucial that teachers identify the learning objectives for each session to ensure that chunks of time are devoted to specific learning goals and decisions are not wasted carrying on from the last session without anything specific being achieved. It is therefore important that schemes of work identify the learning goals for each session and define how they are going to be assessed. It means putting your planning into action. It's about using assessment to guide learning, not just to measure it. This means integrating assessment naturally into your lessons, providing specific feedback, and encouraging students to reflect on their own learning. Let's move forward to improving learning. Assessment for learning is a powerful tool for improving learning. Teachers need to make sure that every session learning plan includes details of the learning intentions outcomes. Teachers include a clear statement of what students are expected to learn in each session. How learning intentions outcomes are going to be shared with learners and methods of checking their understanding. Teachers communicate the learning intentions to students in a way that is clear and understandable. They use various strategies to check students' understanding throughout the session. Information on the assessment criteria and marking. Teachers provide clear information about the criteria that will be used to assess student work. Next is assessment opportunities. Teachers build in opportunities for assessment throughout the session. This could involve quick checks for understanding, exit tickets, or more formal assessments. Methods of feedback to be provided. Teachers provide regular and specific feedback to students. They focus on helping students understand what they did well and what they need to improve on. Details of the differentiated range of learners making up the group. Teachers consider the diverse learning needs of students in their class when planning and implementing assessment for learning. They provide appropriate support and challenges for all students. Information on teaching and learning styles incorporated into decisions. Teachers use a variety of teaching and learning styles to cater to the different ways students learn best. How review times are to be used. Teachers use review time to help students consolidate their learning and address any remaining questions. The specifications of the differentiated teaching and learning materials to be used to meet individual learning needs and create effective learning opportunities. Teachers use a variety of materials and resources to meet the individual needs of their students. Last is an evaluation section for the teachers to complete to say what did or did not work well and why. Teachers reflect on their teaching and assessment practices to continually improve.
Good afternoon once again, everyone. Now let us delve into the second lesson for today's topic, assessment for learning, providing evidence of improved learning performance. So the objectives are, upon the completion of this lesson, you should be able to categorize assessment tools used in the instructional process and provide forms of example of tests for each category. So, assessment for learning. Assessment for learning pertains to diagnostic and formative assessment tasks, which are used to determine learning needs, monitor academic progress of students during a unit of instruction, and guide instruction. Students are given ongoing and immediate feedback concerning their performance, and also the teachers utilize the results of these assessments in reaching various instruction decisions, such as selecting a teaching strategy, designing appropriate tasks that consider individual differences, and improve assessment strategies. Assessment for learning envisions the creation of a learner centered classroom with a supportive environment where students regard mistakes as an opportunity to learn. Effective formative assessment mechanisms integrate and embed the following practices shown. So the first one is adjusting learning strategies, goals, or next instructional steps. So, adjusting learning strategies, goals, or next instructional steps means changing how you learn, what you want to achieve, or what you do next based on your progress and needs. It's like figuring out a new route when you're lost or changing your workout routine when you're not seeing results. So, adjusting learning strategies. For example, you're struggling with math problems. You could switch from reading the textbook to watching videos explaining concepts, or when you're bored with a history topic, instead of just reading, you could try to create a timeline or make a presentation to make it more engaging. So, adjusting goals. For example, you want to read 10 books this year, but you're falling behind. You could adjust your goal to 5 books or focus on reading shorter books. Another example is you're learning a new language and you want to be fluent in 6 months. You might need to adjust your goal to be more realistic, like being able to hold a basic conversations. S- So the next one is clarifying learning goals and success criteria. So clarifying learning goals and success criteria is like having a clear roadmap for your learning journey. It helps you understand where you're going and how you'll know when you get there. So when we say learning goals is it's like what do you want to achieve? This is your overall aim for learning. It should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. For example, instead of learning Spanish, a clearer goal would be able to hold a basic conversation in Spanish within 6 months. So another one is eliciting and analyzing evidence of student thinking. So eliciting and analyzing evidence of student thinking is like peeking into a student's mind to understand how they're making sense of the world. It's about uncovering their reasoning, understanding, and misconceptions. So eliciting evidence is like asking open-ended questions. Instead of asking what is the capital of France, ask how did you figure out the capital of France? This helps encourage students to explain their thinking. Using think alouds, uh, you will have students verbalize their thoughts, process as they solve a problem or text, or providing choices. Offer students options for demonstrating their learning, like writing, drawing, creating a video, or presenting a project. Also, using exit tickets I'm sorry, exit tickets Ask students to write a brief summary of what they learned or a question they still have at the end of a lesson. Now, when we say analyzing evidence, you look for patterns. Are there common misconceptions or strengths among students? You also need to consider the individual differences, like what are the unique ways each student is thinking about the topic. Also, you need to identify areas for growth. Where do students need more support or challenges? Another is reflect on your teaching. How can you adjust your instruction based on what you've learned about student thinking? Now, for an example for this is the learning goal. Students understand the concept of fractions, and if they understand, then the students uh, they will be instructed to ask to draw a picture to present. Some students draw a whole circle and shade half of it correctly. This shows they understand the concept of dividing a whole into equal parts. And as for the other students, draw a rectangle and shade half of it, but the halves are not equal. This suggests a misconception about dividing a whole into equal parts. Another one is the engaging in self-assessment and peer feedback. So engaging in self-assessment and peer feedback is like having a team of experts review your work to improve it. It's a collaborative way to learn and grow. So self-assessment is like how you think about your work. You reflect on your strengths and areas for improvement. For example, I did a good job explaining the main idea, but could have used more examples to support my points. Also, you need to use specific criteria, using rubrics, checklists, or learning goals to guide your self-evaluation. You also need to be honest with yourself. Don't be afraid to identify areas where you need to improve, and also you need to set goals for improvement. Use self-assessment to identify what you want to work on next. So when we say peer feedback, share your work. Give your peers the opportunity to see your work. You need to be specific and constructive. Give detailed feedback that is helpful and actionable. For example, I like how you use visual aids, but I think you could add more details to your explanation. Now, when giving feedback, when receiving feedbacks, you need to be open. You need to listen carefully to what your peers have to say and use it to improve your work. Benefits of self-assessment and peer feedback. So, improve learning, students become more aware of their strengths and weaknesses, leading to a better outcomes. It also enhances their communication. The students develop their communication skills by giving and receiving feedback. Now, the last one that we have is providing actionable feedback. Providing actionable feedback is like giving someone a map to get to their destination, not just telling them they're lost. It's about giving specific and helpful advice that students can use to improve their work. So, when we say focus on specifics, avoid vague statements. Instead of saying good job, identify specific strengths. Like, I like how you use strong evidence to support your argument. Also, you need to point out specific areas for improvement. Like, your introduction could be more engaging. Consider starting with a question or a surprising fact. Another one is use examples. So, for example, the paragraph about the historical context is well written. You could try using this style in the paragraph about the modern day impact. Also, when providing actionable feedback, you need to be clear and concise, using simple language. You need to avoid jargons or technical terms that students might not understand. You need to focus on the most important points, pri- prioritizing the areas where students can make the biggest impact, and keeping it brief. Students are more likely to read and act on a concise feedback. Also, you need to offer some suggestions. Don't just point out problems, provide solutions. For example, instead of listing facts, try organizing your ideas into categories or suggest alternative approaches. You could try using a different type of chart to present your data. Also, offering resources like check out this website for examples of well written introduction. Also, you need to encourage reflection. Ask questions to prompt deeper thinking. What are some other ways you could have organized your research? Or encourage students to set goals for improvement. Like, what will you focus on next time you write an essay? Or give students the opportunity to respond. What are your thoughts on the feedback I've provided? For example, uh, a student work, an essay about the impact of technology. For example, for the feedback is you you provide their strength. You did great. You did a great job of researching different perspectives on the topic, and then you provide the area of improvement. The essay would be stronger if you included more specific examples of how technology has affected different aspects of society. And then there comes in the suggestion where you consider focusing on one specific area, like education or healthcare, and providing detailed examples of how technology has changed it. And then the reflection question: what are some other areas of society where technology has had a significant impact? Remember, actionable feedback is a gift that helps students become better learners. By making your feedback specific, clear, and helpful, you can empower students to improve their work and reach their full potential.
Good day, everyone. I'm Armando Pila Buson Jr. and one of the reporter of this PowerPoint presentation. And this is my part. First, let's talk. Let me introduce to you my part. Assessment methods can be categorized according to the nature and characteristic of each method. Macmillan, 2007, I identified four major categories: selected response, constructed response, observation, and student self-assessment. First, we have here selected response. Selected response, this is a test or type of pen and paper assessment where students pick their answer from a set of given options. Common formats include multiple choice questions, true or false statement, and matching items. These types of questions are straightforward, making them easy for students to understand the answer quickly. Also, this method is ideal for measuring knowledge and simple understanding. Teachers use it to assess how well students recall facts, basic concepts as it provides clear, objective answers that are easy to score. Next, we have constructed constructed response. This subjective format demands that students supply their answer to question, problem, or task. Included in this category are brief constructed response item, performance assessments, essay items, or oral questioning. Constructed response tests require students to provide their own answers to questions, problems, or tasks. This format includes various types like brief constructed response, performance assessments, essay questions, and oral questioning. Instead of choosing from giving options, students must generate their answer based on their understanding. Examples of brief instructed response include sentence completion, short answer questions, labeling diagrams, or solving simple problems. These types of assessment are more subjective and allow teachers to evaluate students' deeper understanding and ability to apply knowledge. Next, we have teacher observation. This is a form of ongoing assessment where teachers are required to be watchful of the student's behavior, strengths, and weaknesses. Teachers may use a checklist while an activity is ongoing or while a student performs a task. Observation is ideal for measuring mastery of skills. Teacher observation is a continuous assessment method where teachers closely monitor students' behavior, strengths, and weaknesses. During activities or tasks, teachers may use checklists to systematically record their observations. This method is especially useful for evaluating students' mastery of skills, as it provides insight into how they perform in real time and over a period of time, allowing more personalized feedback and support. And I have some examples of number one is class participation. A teachers observe how often a student contributes to class discussion, noting if they answer questions confidently or struggle to engage. Group work. During a group project, a teacher uses a checklist to observe how students collaborate, tracking whether they contribute ideas, share tasks, and communicate effectively with teammates. Last is skill mastery. In a physical education class, a teacher observes how well students perform specific skills like throwing a ball or maintaining proper form in an exercise, using a checklist to note areas of strength and improvement. Last, we have student self-assessment. This is a process where students are given the opportunity to reflect and rate their own work based on agreed set of criteria. This may be done through an activity checklist, journals, and self-report inventories. Student self-assessment is a process where students can reflect and evaluate their own work using a set of agreed upon criteria. Uh, this encourages students to take responsibility for their learning and assess their progress. Example, student self-assessment include completing an activity checklist to track their performance, writing reflections in journals about their learning experiences, or filing out self-report inventories to rate their strengths and areas needing improvement. These methods help students develop self-awareness and promote growth by allowing them to identify areas for improvement. And that would be all for my part. Thank you, everyone.